Oh my God, we did it. We're done. We're done. We're done. We're done. Ah, yes. That was 2 weeks, but we're done. Animal taming. I'm done with this nightmare. Let's let's pull up the spreadsheet and see what this took. Hey everybody, this video is going to be just a little bit different. It's not going to be the usual weekly update video that I do. Yeah, we spent a couple weeks leveling an animal tamer, but this video is mainly going to be a guide on how animal taming is trained, in 2022. As with any guide video, I'm going to try to put in the comments a table of contents so that if you only need certain information, you can click right to it. But for those of you who are looking for a complete overview, I think you'll find this guide overall pretty helpful. And for those of you who don't know, animal taming as a profession, particularly as it pertains to training animals, has changed a lot sometime in recent years. I don't know exactly when, but it's been revamped massively. The main thing that's really different is you have a lot of customization as it pertains to pets. So a lot of effort goes into custom designing kind of the stats and the skills that your pet has. And the net effect seems to be that the best pets nowadays seem really, really powerful when compared to what I remember from 10 or 15 years ago. So before I get too far into it, I thought maybe I should give you guys a basic understanding of the differences in training nowadays versus in the past. Back in the day, it was very simple. You just tame creatures over and over and over until you hit 120, and that was essentially it. And that remains true today up until you hit 90 skill, and then from 90 skill onward, things are a little bit different now. I will say that to do the strategy that I'm going to discuss from 90 to 120 does require that you have the Time of Legends expansion. It's going to require the use of masteries, which you need that expansion to use. If you don't have it, good luck. You're doing it the old-fashioned way all the way to 120. I'm sorry. So we're definitely going to get into a little bit of where should you go when kind of a discussion. But the one thing I wanted to point out early on is if you're a new player, particularly if you have young player status on your account, you might have some options available to you as far as where to train that would be impractical or just a little bit too annoying for a veteran account to take advantage of. And the reason for that is because accounts that have the young player status, to my understanding, will not be attacked by monsters in many cases, particularly if you're not in dungeons. I think you still get attacked when you're in dungeons, but outside, they will pretty much ignore you. So where there's places where you see good tames mixed in with a bunch of hostile stuff, you might actually be able to go there and walk around relatively safe and tame, whereas an older account is going to just be dealing with way too many monsters and it's going to be way too frustrating. So a good example of a place like this would be the desert near what I think is referenced as the crossroads. There's a million scorpions and they basically spawn instantly, but they're aggressive, and B, they're surrounded by, orcs and these desert elementals, and there's just a million things that attack you. So it's obnoxious to go there if everything's attacking you. But as a young player, you can actually go there and tame freely and not worry about that. So that's just something to think about. There might be more options if you explore a little bit. One of the other things that might be worth mentioning is the skill gain system in Ultima and how technically, if you have less total skill points on your character, you will gain faster. I wanted to address that because I don't think it's really applicable in this particular scenario or in many scenarios, given how fast skills gain. Basically, the game is kind of keeping an eye out for how long you haven't gotten a gain in a particular skill. And if it hasn't seen you get a gain by X amount of time, it will make sure you get that gain. It's kind of like a guaranteed skill gain thing. And if you go to the UO website, there's a whole table that shows it. The more total points your character has, the longer the interval will be where the game will give you a guaranteed gain. So for example, if we're talking about your animal taming skill between 85 and 90, if you're under 350 total skill points on your character, you're gonna get a guaranteed gain every 3.8 hours. If you're 500 or less, then you're going to be every 10.1 hours. If you're 700, then it's going to be 18.6 hours. And on paper, that sounds like a big deal, but I don't actually think it matters. And the reason that I say this is because if you look at what I actually gained from 85 to 90, I was gaining about 1 point per hour. So you're just never, ever going to get to a point where you're needing more than 3, 10, 18 hours. It doesn't make a difference. You're going to be gaining so much faster than that this system really doesn't apply. So my conclusion, and if you guys think I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments. I just don't think this makes a difference. Don't go out of your way trying to have a character with super low skill, because you're going to be gaining faster than this system will be relevant. I probably should point out before really getting into this that you can buy a character token on the Ultima Online shop that'll allow you to assign a couple skills. I think it's 3 skills to 90, thus bypassing the need for you to do any of the things I'm about to teach you how to do. I'll be honest with you, this is a really tedious skill to level, and if doing that kind of thing and spending money on a shop like that is not something that bothers you, I would consider it in this case, because this is a lot of time leveling this skill, and it's not really a skill that you can do while making money or doing whatever. You're kind of just stuck taming the same junk over and over and over again, and the skill only really becomes useful much later once you've got tames and you have the high skill. So you can bypass this whole project by buying the token and then using the mastery book to level the skill, but I thought it would be worth pointing out that is an option for those of you who wish to do it. That's not what I did, but there's nothing wrong with that if you're okay with it. So the next thing we should do is get some prerequisites out of the way, the things that you really should be doing before you get this process started. In my opinion, you should really do everything you can to start this character with 50 animal taming. Whether that means you start a fresh character with 50 and soulstone it over to a different character, or you're just starting a fresh character. This skill is a headache to level, and minimizing how much time you have to be doing it taming animals, to me, is a smart choice. How it can be done, you can use some of the references we talk about in this guide to do it, but just my opinion, I would recommend starting with 50. One thing that I think is super important, and every single person that is doing this should do this, is you should get your hands on a crystal ball of knowledge. And basically what this is it's an item that'll tell you when you're performing a skill if the skill gain range is optimal. So for example, if you are 50 animal taming and you try to tame a rabbit, it's going to tell you too easy. If you try to tame a dragon, it's going to say too challenging. You know, and there's a range in there, and you're going to try to make sure that you're always taming something that's optimal. The crystal ball of knowledge is a super useful tool, and you should try to get one. I'll try to link something in the comments to show you how to do that. You just need a couple things from the Doom dungeon, and you need some, I think it's dragon bones, and then like 100 of each, and you turn it in, and then you're good. And I have like 5 of these things. I've got them on a bunch of my characters. They're super great. If you don't know about them, get them. They're wonderful. The next thing that I think is super critical is a bunch of animal taming jewelry. So the whole thing is you're going to be using that crystal ball of knowledge to make sure you are always taming optimal things. And by having rings and bracelets that you can juggle on and off with different levels of animal taming skill, you can make sure essentially you're always taming something that's optimal. So the way that I did it is I bought a bracelet and a ring that had plus 15, and then I used my imbuer to make rings. You could pick rings or bracelets, one or the other, and then make one for 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. You make one for each. So I had a bag full of rings, and as I was animal taming, I would shuffle them around to make sure that I was always optimal. So you could do it without this, but by using this technique, you can pretty much always make sure you're perfectly optimal when you're animal taming, and that's gonna make this process a lot easier. So the next thing, I would recommend having some way to dispose of animals that you've tamed and released. You don't always need to do this. In many places, once you tame it, something else will respawn, so the area will just fill up more and more and more and more. But there's times when you might want to get rid of stuff that you've tamed. You can't gain off of something you've already tamed once. So whether that's magery or whether that's just making sure you're bringing 3 or 4 creatures around with you to have them attack whatever you just tamed, either way, I just recommend having a way to do it. And then one other thing, and this is totally optional, when you finish animal taming, you're going to want to start using it immediately. You're going to want to start training up a pet. So I would recommend making a friend and having them tame some things for you, like a beetle, which you can train up quite a bit, and start the bonding process. So have them transfer that creature to you, feed it till it's happy, and then put it in your stable. In a week from that point, feed it again, and then it's bonded. Because that way, as soon as you're done with this project, you're going to have a couple pets that are already bonded and ready for training, and I think that's a good way to go. It'll give you something to do while you go out and train new stuff and wait for that to bond. Another thing that I think is super helpful is to have a rune book full of all of the locations that you plan on going. The whole thing that you need to realize is, to make this process less painful, you have to always be taming. There really should not be more than 1 or 2 seconds between when you finish taming something, releasing it, and you're already taming the next thing. And there's times when where you are dries up, or someone comes and starts doing the same thing you are, and there's not enough available for you to gain and to keep that speed going. So having multiple places in rune books ready to go is going to make this way faster. So for example, you're going to spend a lot of time probably in the bullpens in Jellum. So what you might do is you might mark a rune to the Trammel version, the Fell version, and then you might also mark runes to Trinsic Barrier Island, Trammel, and Fell. There's so many animals there that you can always be taming. If one is dried up, head to the other one. And you should only be taking a few seconds to make that decision, and just move as fast as you possibly can. If anyone is interested in using the rune book that I'm showing you today, that is available for you in my house in the location shown on the screen. You can go ahead and open it up and use it and mark your own runes accordingly if that's helpful. As a reminder, the house is directly east of the Moonglow Trammel Moongate. So before we talk about some good places to go where there's plenty of things to tame for fast gains, I just want to reinforce the point that you can really go anywhere as long as you have the plus skill gain jewelry we talked about earlier. So for example, let's say you're 50 skill, but you have the jewelry. You can boost your skill up into the 60s, 62, 63, and you can go to Ice Island, where polar bears are perfectly optimal in that skill range, and they spawn like crazy, and you're never going to run out. So you don't need to follow all the places I'm showing. You can find an optimal place just kind of using the jewelry that we talked about earlier. So a place that you can go in the 50s, maybe up to 58, is a quest location where essentially Timberwolves spawn constantly. As soon as one is killed or removed, another one basically spawns right in its place. So you never run out of supply. I actually think that this is part of a quest for going from human to elf. So you can see on screen here kind of where that is. If you kind of stay right in this little area, Timberwolves will spawn as fast as you can tame them. So, you know, you can carry them around with you, 2 or 3, and you can kill off ones that you're taming. That might be a way you do it, but this is a pretty good spot from like 56, 57, 58. It's a pretty good spot. It's pretty consistent. Just keep going here until you see your crystal ball of knowledge change from optimal to easy. Then you move on to the next spot. So the next really good spot where you'll stay for quite a while is, like I said earlier, Ice Island. There are so many polar bears, and I also believe walruses are the same skill to tame as well, that you will be just taming, releasing constantly. You'll never run out of supply. From what I can tell, as soon as you tame one, another one will spawn. So if you just release them and don't kill them, the island will fill up with bears, and they get kind of out of control pretty quick. I'll, let you decide if that's what you want to do. Some people find it annoying, some people don't. But just bear that in mind. You could also bring 3 bears with you and kill off, whatever you're taming. That's an option. And one thing I wanted to point out is this particular spot seems to be very good. A lot of bears spawn here, and when you kill them, they spawn instantly. So this is kind of where I focus my efforts. You can also check out other parts of the island. I think the very southern tip of the island is also okay, but this is really good for this level range. Now, I personally, after I finished polar bears, went to scorpions in the desert. I believe, again, it's the crossroads they call it. I don't recommend it unless you're a young player account. There's just so much junk there that attacks you that it became impractical. So I probably added a couple hours to my total time to do this because of that. But great spot if you're able to not get attacked because of your account status. So something to think about. They spawn fast, and there's like a million of them. So it's good if you're a young player. Now, the place where I think you'll end up spending the most amount of time are the Jellum bullpens, which you take a teleporter off the main island to get to. And I would personally recommend having a rune marked to both the Trammel and the Fel versions of this. A lot of times Trammel has people there, so having Fel bookmarked is good. Essentially what you're going to do here is you're going to use your jewelry to get yourself optimal for taming bulls. And you're more or less going to stay here with some other bonus supplemental locations, depending on how busy it gets, but all the way to 90, right? So this is a really good spot. The thing that's important about this location that's worth noting is how you kill off your tames has a big impact on how fast things spawn. So for example, what you want to do is you want to tame a bull and you want to immediately kill only that bull. If you kill a bunch of other stuff in the Jellum bullpens, it really screws up the spawn and it's going to take a lot longer to get the bulls that you need. If you just tame the bulls, release them, kill them, you will pretty much have a constant supply, and occasionally you'll run out. Just flip over to the other facet, Trammel, Fel, whatever, do that there for a while till you run out. You'll go back and you'll be all good to go. So just make sure you're not wiping out the entire pen with like an EV or an earthquake or whatever. Just take out what you're taming and you'll find that the bulls spawn very quickly. Now, one other place that I think you should always have in your runebook is the Trinsic Barrier Island. Both Trammel and Fel, all sorts of great stuff spawns here. Whether it's going to be bulls, you're going to have great hearts. All these things are going to be right in your skill range for leveling from, you know, high 60s, low 70s, all the way up to 90. Again, using jewelry to manipulate. So what I did is I would bounce between the Jellum bullpens, Trammel, Fel. If they got populated or if I ran out, I would head over to Trammel Barrier Island, tame what I could there, and then go back and repeat. So between these 4 locations, I was always taming. There's no reason why you should be waiting more than 1 or 2 seconds between finishing one tame and starting another one. And as long as you're doing that, this isn't gonna be too bad of a process. But if you start wandering and going to places where spawn is inconsistent, or you start killing off spawns in a way that impacts how fast things spawn, that you need, then this is going to turn into a headache, and you really want to avoid that. If you've got a location that you think is amazing that would help other people, go ahead and throw it in the comments. I think what I've got here, as long as you're using jewelry to manipulate your skills, should get you where you need to go pretty quick. But there's other places that look really interesting. So I was running around in one of the new continents, the one with all the dinosaurs, and I noticed there was one place where a million of these panthers were spawning, but they were kind of mixed in with some aggressive stuff. So again, there might be a lot of really good places for young players. If you have any suggestions, put them down there. Maybe we can compile them and make an official list and post it somewhere. But those are my tips. All right, so all of the things we've just talked about should be able to get you to animal taming skill of 90. And that's when I said earlier that you can now switch to a new strategy. And essentially what this new strategy is you use masteries to essentially spam a skill on, off, and it will slowly take you all the way to 120. Sure, you definitely could continue to do it the way you have been, and if you're enjoying yourself, by all means, continue to do that. But by doing it this way, you can kind of be a little bit more hands-off, and you can multitask and set up a really long macro, which I use the enhanced client to do. Just keep in mind, everything has to be attended. If you do this and you're not at the PC and you're not paying attention when a GM shows up to say hello, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So, you know, you can do this and it's totally legit. Just don't catch yourself walking away from the computer. You know, you really need to be there, keeping your eye on it. Otherwise, you're breaking the rules. So what you're going to want to go ahead and do is go get yourself a book of masteries. I don't know exactly how you do that. I think you can get it with some quests, but I just usually buy them on vendor search. They're not super expensive. The next thing that you need to do is you need to get a primer of animal taming. Essentially, these primers allow you to use the masteries that are in the Book of Masteries. So for what we're talking about right now, you should only need Animal Taming Primer Level 1. Once you're farther along in the character, you're going to want the Primer Level 3. But for right now, just to spam it on and off, you only need Primer Level 1. So that's the cheapest, that's the easiest one to get. So that's what I'd recommend if you're a younger player as well. Just for your reference, these generally are required by defeating champion spawns, and I think there's a few bosses that you can defeat that also drop them. So People that do champ spawns regularly, and I believe the ones in Ilshanar actually work as well to get these, usually have accumulated quite a lot of these. So if the prices are really high on vendor search, if you're in a guild, more than likely someone will have a level 1 primer to let you have for free. They're really not that hard to come by. I personally have 6 because I've been hoarding them. So if you're on Atlantic and I'm streaming, of course, feel free to stop by. I can toss one your way. So once you have your Book of Masteries and you have consumed your primer volume 1 of Animal Taming, the thing you got to do is you got to right click the book in your bag, and then you hit switch mastery, and then you turn on your Animal Taming mastery. So that's how you activate the mastery. And then to use it, you need to go ahead and open up the Book of Masteries. And then the skill that we're going to look for is combat training. And really, all you're going to do is you're going to use the skill, you're going to target a pet, and then you're going to cancel it. And if you just do that over and over and over again, eventually you should find your way all the way to 120. It does take kind of a long time. I was doing everything attended, and it took me, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 days. It was kind of a lot. But at least you're not sitting there having to tame creature after creature after creature. It's just a little bit more tolerable. So, you know, I can be here kind of watching it while I'm making YouTube videos or whatever I'm doing. So just an option for you. I think the most interesting thing for most people who are deciding if they want to create an animal tamer and how they want to skill it up to 90 is, how long does it take to do it the old-fashioned way? So let me break down for you about how long it took for me and kind of what you can expect. So total, it took me about 25.8 hours to complete the project from 50 to 90. The way that breaks down is from 50 to 60, I saw about 2.6 skill gains per hour, 60 to 70, 1.7, 70 to 80, 1.4, and 80 to 90, 1.1. Being totally honest, I thought that the 80s, particularly the high 80s, were going to be really, really painful. It would take a lot longer than it did, but it kind of just kept plugging along. It didn't end up being that bad, and we got there in what I would think is a reasonable amount of time. I did take longer than most people probably would because I made the mistake of trying scorpions, which were aggressive and took me a couple extra hours in the 70s. So while I think I did those about as efficiently as I could, not being a young player account status character, I think I probably slowed myself down by a couple hours there. So all in, I think a reasonable guess to skill this from 50 to 90 would be anywhere from 23 to 25 hours if you're for the most part focused. So I thought I would wrap up with just a few tips. Some of you who use Enhanced Client and like to use only official clients and tools might be wondering, hey, what macro did you use to go from 90 to 120? Like I said, I explained earlier how that works. It took me like 3 or 4 days of attended macroing. You can kind of see on the screen the one that I used. Basically, the first thing is just using combat training from the mastery. The second one is a 1 second delay. And the third icon is target default pet 1. The only thing you need to know is you need to set your default pet first. So there's something called store default pet. Use that and then select the pet that you're going to be using, and then your target default pet will work in this macro. And it's basically just looped a handful of times, and then I hit enable repeating and loop it 10 times. I think mine ran for like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Again, I try to make it so that like I can't forget about it. I can't walk away from it. I have to kind of be there. One other resource that I think is really worth pointing out is a website called UOCAH. If you Google it, I think it's uo-cah.com. It has a bunch of information about pets and pet training and even leveling taming. There's some really good stuff there. They have a really interesting table that you can look at, which basically lets you punch in what your animal taming skill is, and it kind of shows you the things above and below you that are roughly optimal. So you can also use that as a guide to maybe go find things that you can tame that aren't what I've shown you here today. But just generally, I would recommend going to that website and familiarizing yourself with it. They've got a lot of really good stuff there, and you really can't go wrong kind of browsing some of their materials. I'll put a link in the description. So that's pretty much been my experience leveling from 50 to 120. Is it exactly perfect? I'm not 100% sure. There's probably other things out there that could be tweaked or done differently. Like I said earlier, put that in the comments if you have something, if you got a spot, if you have a strategy, if there's something I missed, you know, let everybody know in the comments. But I will say, for those of you who are considering whether or not you want to do this, animal taming does seem like a really great skill. It is for sure powerful and a good way to get into endgame content. The collecting and training of pets can be kind of fun, although there's some power scrolling that can get a little bit expensive, but generally it seems like a really good way if you have the patience to put the time in to get the skill up to where it needs to be. I would recommend it. Took me a couple weeks, but if you really wanted to go crazy, you could probably do it in a day to 2 days if you really wanted to. So any questions, anything I've missed, whatever, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. So should I ask them if they should like and subscribe?
No.
Make sure you check out all the videos in the series. I've linked above the full playlist so that you can start from the beginning and watch through all the way to the end if you're interested. Thanks for watching.